more. And on the other side, you've got no synthetics, no chemicals, animal-based, plant-based, and at some point, these two lines of thought are supposed to meet in the organic world of growing, gardening, and farming. So for me, it's kind of a crazy thing. When I ask most people, are you guys organic growers? Everybody, oh yeah, I'm an organic grower. Then I go, okay, so like what products are you using? What, how do you know you're an organic gardener? How do you know, like when you walk into a store and you buy a product? And what I always tell everybody is, do the research. You know, start to look at it on your own. When I started this whole deal at Malibu Compost, I was a landscape designer and builder, and I had grown up in that era where, you know, there was no such thing as organic or green or sustainable or any of that stuff. And so what happened was we were growing, we were doing a whole bunch of building projects, and I had a whole bunch of clients that were in the entertainment industry, rock stars, movie stars, and I was like the young surfer kid, and they gave me these clients because they said, you know, the older guys in this company said, hey, you deal with these people. So I basically was handed this division while I was like, you know, in college and then out of college, where I was working with all these rock stars, and they all wanted natural stuff in the 80s. So that's kind of where I came from, because there wasn't any of that stuff. It wasn't available. You couldn't go into a store, you know, and buy a bag of Malibu Compost. Nothing like that exists, and that's one of the reasons we started our company. So, a quick review. On the National Organic Program, one of the things that blows my mind on the whole thing is what division of the USDA runs the organic sector. It's actually the AMS, the Agricultural Marketing Services. So, think about what I just told you guys. The Agricultural Marketing Services runs the organic program for the USDA. When I think of marketing, I think of advertising. I think of money. I think of putting out messaging so that people will spend money, or to get some sort of agenda out into the public to buy my product, buy my idea, buy the thought concept. I'm going to get into the gardening part in a second, but I always like to kind of review on organic gardening, because for most people, they don't know a lot of this stuff. But if you literally if you Google the National Organic Program, and you go on there and you look up and you find, you know, the Agricultural Marketing Services, what I just told you guys, then you ask yourself the question, so why is the Marketing Services Division of the USDA, why are they running this program? Money. It's about money. Like when I told you back in the 80s, there was no organic, there was no sustainable, there was only natural, okay? And and then this whole market developed. In the 90s, we had the GMO proliferation start, and then we had this whole movement start with Mrs. Gooch's, which turned into Whole Foods. Trader Joe's got into the organic game, and then all of a sudden Walmart got into the organic game, and now you can go into the crappiest market in the world, and they have an organic section, and it may have like 3 rotted apples, but they're under the organic section. So organics gets manipulated all the time in the marketplace, I think, by what's called greenwashing. And greenwashing, for people that don't know what that is when people send you a message and tell you that something is good when it's not necessarily good, or it may be kind of good, but there's a piece of truth that's in it. There's a piece of truth that's not in it. So I'll give you an example. This is one of my favorites. This is the Organics Kellogg cereals. You know, just innocuous, right? You walk into your store and you see, hey, look at that. I can get organic frosted mini wheats from Kellogg's. Wow, okay, I better buy those for my kids or my grandkids or whatever, right? Well, the truth is, no. Look at the labeling on there and look to see how, what's in there. because per our organic standards, you have a standard that's 35%, 70%, 95%, and 100%. So I was at a class one day and I talked about this, and I had a slide presentation where I was doing, and some guy from the back, who I think was like in the computer industry, he yells out, when I said 35%, he yells out, "What's in the other 65%?" And I thought, that's a great question. What is in the other 65%? So, Google it. Become a black belt at Googling. Start looking at this stuff and start seeing, what am I putting into my garden? What am I putting into my digestive system? What am I putting into my soul? What am I putting into everything, into my body? So check it out. A last quick thing is, where did organics come from? So the word organic came from organon, which was a treatise on reason by this guy. That would be Aristotle, not my father. So Aristotle wrote a treatise on logic called Organon. It's an interesting read. I have Organon, and it's very applicable to logic and logical thinking today. Then the second time we ever heard the word that's a root for organic came from Francis Bacon. He did Novum Organum, which is basically his work on deductive reasoning. So the whole world of organic started with organic logic and reasoning, and then it gets into this world today where it's about, something could be organic, meaning like, hey, I fell in love with her, it was like love at first sight, it was really great, it was, an organic thing. So something that just happens as part of our, movement. Or it can be like what I read to you, that definition is, in terms of growing food, which is what all of us guys are involved in. If you're involved in the nursery world, or you're involved in the gardening or the grow world, then what's happening is we're buying products that are labeled organic, going back to that definition that I gave to everyone earlier. I'm going to say a quick note to you right now. Sun's coming up, so I may put my sunglasses on in a second here. That wasn't my note, but anyway. For any of you guys that are watching that live near Barson's greenhouse, if you guys direct message us your name and your address, we'll forward that over to Chad at Barson's later on today. You're going to get a free sleeve of tea from Barson's. That's their gift for supporting and being part of this first Boo TV presentation, as also and part of the presentation for the class that those guys are helping us do. So if you do that, and then for you guys that don't live near Barson's or aren't in that that area where you would shop at Barson's greenhouse, if you guys direct message us your address and your name, we're going to go ahead and, so for you guys at Barson's, you're going to get one of these guys for free. For watching this and for supporting Malibu Compost, for supporting Barson's, for supporting basically what we believe is true organics. So you're going to basically get a sleeve of tea, and so you can see sleeve of tea, Booze Brew, tea bags. You guys can make compost tea. Okay, so these are for your local guys. We're going to do, and when we do these classes, we're going to do this where we're going to do giveaways. We're going to give away all kinds of stuff. It could be t-shirts, it could be a little bag of Boo, could be, we've got some new hats coming out, it could be whatever it is. And then for you guys that don't live near Barson's and can shop there, if you send us your name, your address, we're going to go ahead and send you a Booze Brew compost tea from Malibu Compost, from our warehouse in Berkeley. You're going to go ahead and get a tea from us for free. And I'll see if I can get Brad. All the cool kids in my neighborhood have these. That's a Malibu Compost sticker. We all have them on our cars, and I love driving into areas and like seeing these in a parking lot on a car. Nothing makes me happier. Well, some stuff makes me happier, but that makes me happy. All right, so we talked about what is organics, where does it come from, that you guys should Google it. One of my other questions too is how many of you guys know what biodynamics is? Generally, in a lot of classes, some people know, some people don't know. If you don't know, Google biodynamics, and or go better yet, go buy the book on Steiner's lecture called Agriculture Course or Course in Agriculture. You'll get some real insight into what it is that Malibu Compost adheres to, and what we believe is the root of organic gardening and growing. And when I say organic, I mean true organic. So as I get into this further, I'll talk to you about like what we believe, what's a core belief for us. And for us, anything that's not 100% organic, we're not interested. So, a couple of environmental factors. A lot of you guys are growing indoors. Some of you guys are growing outdoors. Some of you guys are growing in your garden. Some of you guys have a place like me where you may have been doing a new project at home, whatever. So these are some of the environmental factors that fit into organic gardening overall. So, rain and water. So in California, like where we are, on the outdoor side of things, we had, and in Oregon where we are, we had 141 days of rain on the farm in Oregon last year. We got 30 inches of rain on the farm in California, which usually gets 13 because it's at the top of the valley. And we usually don't get that kind of rain. It's protected from the mountains. But this last year, we had so much rain that we flushed so much nutrient and so much organic matter on all of our farms, and then all of these other farms and projects that we work on. So big thing. So one of the things too, so if you're gardening in containers or you're gardening outside, if you're watering all the time, the reason that we're continually top dressing and doing all the stuff that we're doing is because we're continuously flushing. No matter what you're doing, if you're watering all the time, if you're watering frequently, you're constantly flushing nutrient out. So you have to replenish that. And the same thing that happens when you got rain like we had last year. So environmental factor. The other thing is cold. We're moving out of the summer, and we're moving into a time where when it gets cold and it gets winter, like it is, for us, I slow down in the winter. It's harder for me to get up and do my run and my workout and all that stuff when it's 35 degrees or 40 degrees outside. It's harder to do that. And then also the sun is further away from the planet, so we don't have that kind of heat up, that kind of energy that's happening, so it changes. It does the same thing in the soil. So for the outside, for your home garden outside, and any of your containers that you might have roses or geraniums or whatever you have inside containers, or you could have money trees, whatever. The soil gets cold, the microbes slow down, and the function of the microbes in the soil is to break down organic matter, which then will get so that we've got nutrient that's available for uptake into the plants. So as the soil gets cold, and generally the soil is about 10 degrees warmer than our air temp, but as the soil temps start hitting in the 40s, the microbial life really slows down. And for where I am right now, I'm in Southern California, so we're in like the Ventura County area of Southern California. I'll have really good soil life. So for me, this is a great time to amend my garden, to go ahead and to compost, to go ahead and run compost teas, and not really to grow the plants. I'm not really at this point in my outside, my garden around the property, I'm not really interested so much in pushing the growth of the plants. What I'm really looking at doing is building the soil and growing the soil right now. On the inside, same kind of thing happens, depending on where you are and what kind of situation. Even if you're in a greenhouse, temperature is a really important thing to look at in terms of your soil temp. What is the soil temp? Maximum soil temperature for microbes is about 70 degrees. Perfect. It's a perfect temperature where you've got, as long as there's good organic matter for them to break down and you've got microbial diversity, you're going to have lots of breakdown happening there. Other things. The other thing too that happens on the outside with plants, you get dieback, you get freeze burn, you get all that kind of stuff, and that's just all stuff that happens with the plants. But as long as you're growing healthy soil, you're going to be okay in the spring once the garden comes back to life. Sun. Again, I just mentioned the sun. The sun starts to, fade away in terms of, we have less time where we're under the sun in the fall and winter months. And so what's happening is, and you start to see plant growth slow down, you see photosynthesis slow down, you see the whole process in the garden start to slow down. So that's a really, really important thing to look at as we're moving into the fall and winter months. And if you have a fall, or a cool crop garden going for food right now, great. You're going to move into some times where you're still going to get some great growth out of there, and you'll pull some great stuff out of the garden, depending on where you live over the next month or two. The other thing, air movement. Really important, and the sun on the indoor garden, obviously that's, up to what you're doing in terms of how you're running your indoor grow. On the air, movement of air is super important. So one of the things I did when I came into this property is I started to do pruning. I pruned out a bunch of, right now, I pruned out some dead stuff. I cleaned up some stuff that was in the diseased leaves that had been on the ground, all that kind of stuff. So I cleaned up some stuff. I pulled the skirts up on a bunch of plants, and what I'm doing is I'm letting airflow happen, because the more airflow I've got, the more I've got another barrier for pest disease and for fungal disease. So I try to keep my garden in a place where I'm getting airflow into here. You can't see this, but there's a tree behind Matt, and literally it was laying over, and it was so top heavy that it was starting to just pull down and hang out over this wall. So I'm literally pulling it back. We staked it back, and we did some pruning, maybe about 30%, to lighten it up a little bit, and we're starting to bring that plant back up. Soil. This is another thing too. For me, I just ran some soil tests, and so what I'm doing is I'm sending off some basic analysis from a couple spots in my garden, so I know what a base analysis is. And what I mean by that, what they're going to send me is, what's my pH of the soil, heavy metal content. I'm going to find out what the nutrient content is, and that, just so you guys know, there's a base soil analysis like that, and it's giving you pH, it's giving you what your heavy metal numbers are, it's giving you what your nutrient levels are, your major and minor nutrients and trace minerals, and so it gives you that baseline. And then the other thing, I should show you this while I'm over here. The other thing too that I'm doing is I like to run a biologic. So I run a biological analysis, and what I'm doing is it gives me, basically the ability to look at what I've got going in terms of microbes in the soil. It allows me to look and see here, well, a couple things. It's kind of cool. I'll show you this again. It gives you your range of bacteria and fungi in there. It gives you your larger microorganisms. And it's a great way, especially for a baseline level. So if you get a basic soil analysis and you get the biologic analysis, it gives you two markers from which you can go ahead and see how does your soil grow. So when we get brought onto a project as consultants, a lot of times what we'll do is the first thing that we're going to do is we go ahead and run these two tests. And what I do with those is then it allows me to have that marker. So a project we've been working on, one farm we've been on for 6 years. I have the soil test from the first day we were ever on that farm. And that soil had some real remediation issues in certain areas. In other areas it was better. In some areas it was all native. So we've seen the progression over 6 years of how the microbial colonies have changed and grown, and what areas certain types of plants are proliferating, and other areas where certain types of plants didn't work in that area. No matter how much we tried to tinker with the soil, or make something more fungal or more bacterial, you have certain areas where certain types of plants just aren't going to function, and some of that goes back into sometimes even sun, water, air, just overall, space. So the soil testing I think is really important. So do it if not, and if you haven't done it, get a good basic soil test. It's a good way to go. What do you got, Matt? Call it out. Okay. All right, so a couple of other things. I'm going to get into kind of just like some of the stuff to do in the fall garden outside. And I think for me, one of the things when I looked at as a landscaper, when I started working in gardening, and started getting into landscape design, and then started getting into later into the farming side of things, what happened for us is I started to, especially in the landscape world, I looked at that kind of in our farms. Like in the spring, we have this, kind of prolific growth that we have, and everything starts to happen. And there's a lot of energy, a lot of charge, and that's part of why we're amending our soil, the stuff that we're doing. And then what happens is when you get into the summer, you have this big push of growth. You'll have your second round of pest runs that come through, and the garden gets, a lot of times it gets pushing so much that it gets a little bit out of control. For me, I always look at the fall as the time where I can go ahead and kind of prune everything back, bring everything back to a really good basic level, and kind of reorganize the garden again, so that it's ready to go for the spring. It's ready to overwinter, to slow down over winter, and then start to come back up into the spring. So I start with like basic stuff, weeding. Like right now, I'm sure, like I did a whole bunch of weeding last weekend when I came home from Seattle. So I weeded this place, and what I'm doing is I'm taking stuff out. I had stuff that hadn't gone to seed, so I'm taking it out. And in this garden, because I want to clean up, and I want to get the compost onto the soil and some of my dry amendments onto the soil right now, and then start running some teas. The other thing too is, as I mentioned earlier, I did a lot of pruning. So like for me, like right now in the garden, a really good time to like light prune up things that are like leaners, like the tree that was leaning over in my garden and then I just staked up. Really good time to do that kind of 1/3 prune back and take some of the weight off, so that when you get either rain or snow or ice on to the plants, and they start to lean over, they start to crush other things underneath them, they start to pull out, they start to tear at the root. So really good time to go ahead and do some of the pruning. Also on the bloomers in your garden, if they've stopped blooming or they've hit the end of their blooms, start deadheading everything, get all that stuff done. And then shaping. Plants that have lost shape, that you want to have a shape and a form into the garden, perfect time to go ahead and start to cut back a little bit, any of that overgrowth, to go ahead and start the reshaping process. So I did that on a bunch of plants in my garden, and I even had some hedges and stuff like that that I wanted to shape up, because they were just kind of rambling everywhere and they just looked like a big mess. And then once we started to shape them up, the gardens took some form, and you could actually see into the garden again. I could see space, I could see areas where I'm going to go ahead and plant new stuff, and gave me space to go ahead and start putting compost down and start to regenerate the soil. Other things, staking, great time. The fall garden is a great time to stake outside. Go ahead and take stuff like trees, like great time right now to plant trees. If you're going to plant some trees, a perfect time to do them. Get some stakes in there, get them ready to stake up. Or if you've got trees that you planted last year that you never put a stake in, and you want to help that vertical growth, stake them. Perfect time to go ahead and do that. If you've got vines in your garden and you have them, where you haven't trellised them at all, great time to tie off vines and do just a little bit of pruning on them and get them up so that they're tied off. And then this is a perfect time, the fall right now. It's a perfect time for like your trees, your hardy perennials, cover crops. You can do your clover, fava, fetch. You can go ahead, do all those are a perfect time to go ahead and do that. And also as your food gardens start to wane over the next month or so, and we start to get the freezes start to come. Great time to go ahead and get the cover crops down in those food gardens now, so that ultimately they're in before we get freeze, and then ultimately you can go ahead and they will do some benefit to the garden, come spring. So I'm going to talk about for me, in the garden here, kind of soil building and enhancing, and what, you know, what I do generally in the garden, like what I'm going to do right now in this garden, and what I'm going to use and how I'm going to use it. So a couple of things before I talk about, like, you know, about what we're going to do. I didn't mention the testing. Something that I did mention while we were testing, because I was talking about the organics, like one of the ways that we know our products are completely organic and free of stuff that you don't want in there, or we don't want in there, because I run a couple of analysis that I think are game changers for us. So like this is a genetic ID. So genetic ID, basically what you're doing is, you know, basically what we're doing with that is we're looking for GMOs. We're looking to see that there's no GMO feedstock in the manures. So that's what we're doing with that. And then the other thing is we run toxicology analysis. So you run an analytical where basically you're, what we're doing with that is we're running a toxicology screen on compounds that are in fungicides, pesticides, and herbicides. And the reason that we do that is because whatever your position is on GMOs, but for us on the GMO crops, basically what's happening is you've got alfalfa, you've got soy, you've got corn that are sprayed with broad spectrum herbicide. So we run the genetic ID A to make sure that there's no GMO corn, soy, or alfalfa detected in our product, in our compost, and in our potting soil. We run it on the potting soil, the compost, the teas. So everything we make we run genetic IDs on. Then we run the toxicology panel as a follow-up to make sure there's no residues from any of those herbicides in our product. So for us, we start off a place of knowing our stuff is clean, and knowing that we can go ahead and grow food, you can grow medicine, you can grow your roses if you use, you know, whatever you're doing. If you want you know, basically a clean slate and a clean garden, that's the reason that we do what we do. So the first thing I do in the garden, when I'm like right now, what I'm going to do in this area out here that I'm standing in, I'm basically going to go ahead and I'm going to take a kelp meal. So, you know, this is a kelp meal that you know, down to earth, you know, kelp meal. You can get it all over the place. It's a great product. What I'm going to do with this is basically, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to amend areas with this. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of like amend basically my whole bed with this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to run it at maybe all of the amends, the dry amends that I'm going to do are going to be at maybe a 1/16 of an inch. I'm going to do the same thing with their azomite. This is a granulated azomite, and so basically what I'm doing is I'm going to go ahead and run, just kind of do exactly what I'm doing, just kind of do a dusting with it. So that's what I do with the two of them. I've got some green sand somewhere in my garage. I'm going to find that. I'm going to add the green sand to my mix. So that's the next thing that I will do. I'll add the green sand. And then what I'm going to do is I don't water it at that point. I get everything out. And then basically what I'm going to do, here I'll just open up a bag of compost. This is one of our 12-quart bags. Nice seal. So here we go. Just open up a bag. There you go. So basically, okay. Can we see that? All right. So basically, I just opened up a bag. That is Booze Blend Biodynamic Compost, made on our farms in Oregon and California. So basically, that's what I got going. And what I'm going to do then is I'm going to take, and just so you can see in the bag, it's kind of a nice, you know, just a beautiful, finely screened, just nice, loamy, beautiful compost. So what I'm going to do basically, so in these areas where you saw me go ahead and put the dry amends down, what I do is I just kind of literally, in my garden, I walk out and I do what I'm calling like an 1/8 of an inch dusting of compost. And I'm going to end up today doing this whole area so the bed gets done. So basically, I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to come back, and I'm going to put the wand on my onto my hose end. And what I'm going to do is this. What's really nice about this wand in particular gives a really nice kind of fine, light rain type of mist and light rain to it effect. So what I'm going to do is I don't want to run the compost off. I don't want to drench it. I don't want to soak it, so that it starts to puddle and pool and run. What I want to do is I want to get everything wet enough that I start to go ahead and wick up some of the dry amend into that, and then all this stuff as I go through the cycle of, we've got some weather, I've got some irrigation out here, that these beds just slowly let that compost get into the soil and break up the garden. Oh, got a car that just drove by us. And then the thing that I'm going to do out here is I'm going to go ahead and get this bed kind of going. I don't have at my old, I don't have the raised beds built yet on the new place, so I'm going to go ahead and work on that next. I'm going to start building our raised beds. But for you guys that have raised beds and are growing food, as I said earlier, great time to go ahead and amend everything just as I described it. Water that in lightly, and then go ahead and start to, in the next, as your crops start to come out and finish, go ahead and start getting the cover crops into there, which would be a really great thing to do. And then for me, and if you guys have mulches down on your beds, what I want you to do is pull back the mulch, get these dry amends on the soil, and go ahead and get the compost down on the soil. You can always cover it back with the mulch, which is fine. I also here, I have a whole bunch of leaves that are great. Came off a bunch of my different trees around the property, and I'm going to go ahead and shred those. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that leaf mulch will be my mulch in the garden beds, a shredded leaf mulch, which would be great over the winter. The last thing I do is about 3 weeks after, so 3 weeks from now, when I'm done amending the rest of the beds out here in the front garden, what I'm going to basically do is I'm going to run some tea. I'm going to go ahead and take a tea bag. I'm going to go ahead and drop it into 5 gallons of water. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to let that soak for 8 hours. I'm going to come out here and I'm going to go ahead and basically drench and spray, my whole front area here. The thing I love these little pump sprayers like this, little half-gallon ones. They're fantastic. This is like my go-to pump and sprayer in the yards. Really easy because you can literally just walk around with these guys, hold your handle, and just do your spray, do your deal. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'm literally not spraying my plants. I'm literally going to be spraying the ground and drenching the ground. So I'm going to go ahead and get compost tea everywhere. And what I'm going to do, depending on what the weather does, is I'm going to do that several times. If I, like for here in Southern California, we're going to basically have, and here's my little, when my compost tea is done, I basically start to vortex stir it. So I squeeze out the humic acid that's in that tea, and then I go ahead and I go ahead and I run a vortex. I get a vortex going in my container, and then I switch my vortex, and that's how I'm aerating. I'm actually in my garden at home. I'm not running aerated teas. I'm doing tea extractions. Much easier on the microbial life, and much easier way to do it. I've got a 55-gallon brewer that I'm going to actually set up in the back for the veggie garden, because I'm going to do a lot of reparation of the soil back there before I build the beds for the soil that's underneath, because that area hasn't been grown, been used to grow food, and there's been other animals on this property and all kinds of stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and remediate that area out there. With the teas, because I'm going to probably fluctuate between Like yesterday it was 90 out here. You know, this morning it was cooler. It was 56 this morning when Matt and I started, you know, putting things together out here. I'll have fluctuations where I go temperatures between, you know, 70 and 80 and 90 over the next month and a half, and then even maybe drop down into the 60s. But my lows are only, I'm not going to have a freeze yet, so I'm going to go ahead and use teas, which will work beautifully. On your indoor, you know, there's, you know, if you guys are running teas, if you reach out to us, we have a whole bunch of different programs, you know, for that you can use all the way through the whole year, and you know, different types of amending that we do, and we're happy to send you some sheets that we have put together for those things. Last couple of, and then too, for people that have lawns, this is the time of year right now, compost your lawn. And when I'm saying compost, just, you know, just broadcast out, you know, a 1/4 inch of compost out onto your lawn, and then water that in really good, like a normal watering, and then come back in 3 to 4 weeks later and do a compost tea. You can do the same thing with the Booze Brew, but make a 1 gallon concentrate, or you can buy our, we make a turf tea that has a larger bag. And you can make a concentrate with that. Cars pass. 1 gallon of tea. You can use this in a hose end sprayer and go ahead and spray with that. So you can use a hose end sprayer, set it at a medium setting, and you'll do 1,500 square feet of lawn out of 1 gallon of concentrated Booze Brew. So again, just kind of as a follow-up, if you guys direct message us with your message, with your address and your name, and you go into Barson's, you guys can, you know, claim a tea. If you guys are not in, you know, the Barson's customer area and you don't shop at Barson's, send us your email, send us your address and your name, and we will go ahead and send you out a Booze Brew and a sticker. And the other thing is, and do that before, you know, we wrap up, you know, today. Just send us your stuff. Just direct message us your stuff, or like right after. Like we'll leave it open for, say, you know, a half an hour or an hour until we're done, and just direct message us on the Malibu Compost Facebook or Instagram pages. So I pretty much think that's what I got for today. Couple of other things just to talk about while I'm here. Couple great products that we utilize all the time, and then we are working with both of these companies and Earthbox, making probiotic wellness gardens. I don't know if you guys have gone onto the Probiotic Wellness Garden Facebook page or taken a look at that. We use Grokashi, we use the EM1 from Terraganics, the Earthboxes, and we use Malibu Compost in them, and they're a really great growing system. Another thing too, a lot of times when I tell people I'm drenching, just so you're sure, like when I'm drenching outside, a lot of times I'll go ahead and use my tea that's from the bucket, and use my, you know, one of my watering cans. I got a whole bunch of different types of watering cans. You can also, one of the things I do like a lot is I like these kind of buckets where you can literally have handles on them, because I also use those, walk around the garden and drench with those. Last thing on the teas and the compost. So when you're making your teas and when you're composting, so I always say compost in the spring and the fall in the outdoor garden. Run your teas every 3 to 4 weeks. Run a tea. When you're making a tea, every 60 days, take one of those feedings, save a little bit of the tea, and go ahead and use it on your indoor houseplants. The houseplants definitely don't get enough love. I ask most people, what do you feed your houseplants? And they say water. That's not going to cut it for growing the soil or the plants. I think houseplants are definitely the most neglected plants in the world. There should be you know, a program for neglected houseplants. But anyway, what I want you to do is when you're composting, just give them a little pinch. But every 60 days, if you guys give them a little bit of the compost tea, just save a little bit left from the tea that you made, your indoor houseplants are just going to go crazy. I've got a money tree inside that literally we bought, like it was this big. It's now, you know, 12 feet tall, and it's beautiful, and it's green, and it's lush, and it's amazing. On my indoor orchids, I take a little spritzer bottle and we spritz the roots on the orchids, and they're very good diffuse. So there's a lot of, you can take the same concepts that you're using outside or you're using in a greenhouse, and you can use them on your indoor house plants, and you'll see a huge difference with your plants. So I think that's what I got for today, you guys. If you got questions, direct message us. If you've got, if you want the teas, send us your addresses. And you can also email us at info@malibocompost.com. We're going to kind of fine-tune the Boo TV stuff, but we wanted to get this out, and we wanted to try this, and we want to thank Barson's Greenhouse for helping us put this thing together. And if you guys live near Westland or you're in that Detroit area, and you haven't been to Barson's Greenhouse, amazing store, great family owned, so it's independent. You'll get great advice. They actually are one of the only nurseries that actually grow a lot of their own plants, so they actually grow their own stuff, which is pretty amazing. They have great, on the veggie season, great organic starts. I would highly recommend those guys. Other than that, with Malibu Compost, I just want to say thank you very much for all you guys who support us. Without you guys, we got, we're not even a company. We're like nothing. We're just a couple of guys trying to do, a bunch of guys trying to do something good. We thank you guys for supporting us. We hope that, we can keep bringing you great compost, great stuff from our gardens and our farms, and just, keep giving you guys information about what we think is real, what we think is true. We're not a traditional soil company. We all of our stuff is made on farms. Colin grew up on a biodynamic farm. Everybody that works for us, Matt, all of us are all, we are literally all organic gardeners, and we all care about the planet. We care about the animals on this planet. You can see, Boo is a huge part of our life if you follow us on Instagram or Facebook or look at what we do. And most importantly, you guys, we care about you. Like, we really care about you, your family, your kids, your health. And the whole goal of Malibu Compost is really to try to offer something that's really organic, part of the true organic revolution, that's away from the synthetics, that's not controlled by some large company that's part of a big pharma or waste management or any of the other large industries or global enterprises that control waste around the whole, basically around the whole planet now. So we're trying to give you guys stuff that we think is real, that we think is good, that all of us can put our heads on our pillows at night and sleep. And I know a lot of people tell you a lot of stuff, but honestly, we care about you. We care about your family. We care about this planet. And thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to share this stuff with you guys, and I look forward to the next run. And please hit us up. We look forward to your comments, questions, whatever. Thank you. And here comes the sun.